Hi guys, happy Thursday and welcome back to the Sage Sorority. This is your host Shantel Russo, and I hope everyone's having an amazing week. I'm still in Dubai, so maybe there's an extra pep in my voice because the sun is shining every day and I'm loving it. So I just had my Spanish latte and I feel very energetic for today's podcast. Honestly, so good. It's one of the many things I'm going to miss when I go back to London. As you can tell by today's podcast, we are unlearning some of the lies what women in their 30s and 40s know now. So this was actually inspired by a trend on TikTok. I don't know how many of you guys are on TikTok and are, like constantly on the internet in that way. There's been a trend with this really like deep, dark music, and it's kind of like tell me something, share some advice, share a piece of wisdom. And then it's like, I'm not talking about XYZ. So like no fluff, no BS, no basic stuff. Like I want like the real deal. So I contributed to the trend and I said, women in your 30s and 40s, tell me one belief you let go of that changed everything. I'm not talking about I stopped caring what people think. I mean something deeper, darker, something that completely shifted your sense of self. And I got a few really good ones and I kind of broke them down into different segments. So we've got reclaiming the self, redefining power and boundaries, and then spiritual and energetic realization. So I'm going to share them with you guys, especially for those of you who are not on TikTok, but you really need to. And you can start by following me at Shantel Russo and also follow the pod at the Sage Sorority. We are on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and I am as well. So give us a follow. Before we get into today's episode, guys, don't forget to subscribe. If you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, please then subscribe on Spotify. If you're subscribed on Spotify, please then subscribe on Apple. If you're subscribed on both and you've got Amazon, please subscribe on Amazon. I believe Amazon Prime members automatically have some sort of thing with like Amazon podcasts and stuff like that. So subscribe everywhere where you can get podcasts and share an episode with a friend. There's definitely something in my last 10 episodes, this being episode 11, that they can definitely enjoy. So be sure to share the pod with a friend. The easiest way to grow the show is to spread it to like-minded people. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Okay, so segment 1, reclaiming the self. So these were the comments that really didn't need to be too loud. And what they were saying was incredibly honest and definitely stopped my scroll. And I think it would be very helpful for those at the beginning of their journey. So I'm going to reference the TikTok handle just in case you're listening. Thank you so much for your advice. So this is at GNV. And they said, stopped being the background character in my own life. So right off the top, this is something that I can agree with. This is something that I overcame. In my late teens, early 20s, I was definitely the background character of my own life, very okay and comfortable with not being seen, kind of like being almost like being the mastermind of things, but like not getting the credit and not being too out there. And I will say, in all honesty, I was best friends with someone and then she basically ended the friendship, and that was like the catalyst for me to basically stop playing second fiddle in my own life. So sometimes you're able to learn it in a very holistic, pure way, and sometimes the best glow up comes from heartbreak, and that was my experience. Next up is at MBM Consulting Boutique, and they said, I intentionally choose myself. Choosing yourself isn't always poetic. Sometimes it's walking away quietly, declining invitations, resting when there's work to be done, putting yourself first in a way that isn't putting someone else down. I feel like that's really important to emphasize, because when people hear putting yourself first, they often assume that, well, if I put myself first, I have to then put others last. And I really believe like there's space for both. Yes, does that mean that disappointing others? Sometimes yes. One thing I often say to myself and to my friends is that it is okay for people to be upset. It is okay for people to be disappointed and or frustrated with your decisions, provided that you are making the best decision and the right decision for yourself. Again, you're not intentionally seeking out to make others feel that way, but also it is their prerogative and their life and their emotional space to feel that way if it's a result of your actions. Like, you will upset people, people will upset you, and everyone will be okay. And then the last one for this segment, this was by at Zara Francis. I learned to decenter men, life-changing. So this could be an entire podcast. And I know that especially on socials, for those of you that don't know, especially if you're not chronically online, decentering men is a huge social wave that I would say is global at this point. And some might hear that and roll their eyes. Some might hear that and be very confused. Some might hear that and be offended, especially if you're a man, all of which is totally fine. But I think decentering men is a social ideology that is way overdue, honestly. And without getting too deep into it, because I often say, like, I could do a whole podcast on this, but when it comes to decentering men, like, it's very loaded. There are different sub ideologies within that main framework, but the gist of it, in my opinion, to kind of put you up to speed, is women, especially heterosexual women, are very often told and coerced and kind of nudged and judged into prioritizing a man in their life. Everything that we do as straight women is through the gaze of what men want, what men appreciate, and what men value. That is how we are taught, both intentionally and unintentionally, consciously and subconsciously, at home, in our cultures, amongst our friend groups, and in society, right? As a young girl, I remember being like 6, 7, 8, sitting down with my friends at recess, and it would be like, what are our crushes? You would play like MASH, which I'm sure if you're a millennial, you know exactly what that game is. And a part of that is like where you're going to live, who you're going to marry, like how many kids you're going to have. I don't see little boys being taught to do that. And I don't see Disney movies that show little boys sitting on the grass, like talking about their future wives. I don't see young boys being taught to aspire to marriage. I don't see young boys being raised to clean chicken and scale fish because you need to know how to cook for your future wife and children. Little boys are not taught that. Little daughters are raised. Little boys are watched. And that's why now we have this massive divide between men and women. You know, people say, oh, date an older man because men mature slower than girls. It's like, is that a biological thing, or is it because y'all are not raising your boys to be emotionally intelligent, sound men? Sorry, like, we need to call a spade a spade. And I think decentering men is where that comes from. Sure, there are men that aspire to marriage. There are boys that aspire to be, you know, in a relationship and da 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 da. But often for men that have those aspirations, it comes from a vanity project. It comes from a check in the box. They're not equipped to be emotionally stable and reliable as women are. And the reason why is because women have been doing this work their entire lives. And obviously I'm speaking in huge general situations here. Context is everything. And if your gut reaction is to talk about the exception, it still doesn't really matter, because we're talking about on average here, on average, where most of us lie. And I love the quote, you may think you're the exception to the rule, but it's beneficial for you to not think that. And I agree with that. So to wrap up this point, I think that decentering men as a woman is more about looking inward as opposed to outward. What do I actually like? And that could be something as minor as like, how do I like to dress? Do I dress for the gaze of a man when I go out, or do I dress for the gaze of myself? You know, how do I wear my hair? Do I even like wearing makeup? Do I want to do these things that I've been doing on autopilot because it's something that men like? It's something that men appreciate. You know what I mean? Even makeup. I don't know about all makeup, but I know that blush and like rouge on the lips, that was created to mimic the way women look when they're aroused. Look it up. That is like the origin of it. Again, all for the male gaze. There's a really good scene in Runaway Bride, and I'm actually just gonna like Google it quickly right now, so I can quote it properly. For those of you that don't know, Julia Roberts is actually my favorite actress. So the quick synopsis is there's a woman named Maggie, played by Julia Roberts, who always like bolts from her marriage several times before she can actually walk down the aisle and become a wife. So then you have Ike, who's Richard Gere, and this was kind of like their reunion movie after Pretty Woman. So Richard Gere calls her out on her shit, of course, before falling in love with her, and she with him, you know, obviously, and the movie ends with their fully actualized wedding, of course. But along the way, Ike is a reporter, and he ends up finding Maggie because she's a runaway bride. He ends up interviewing her. Eventually, they fall in love. My favorite part of the movie is the eggs scene. So Ike, the reporter, interviews each of Maggie's previous men, right? And they clearly state the way that she likes her eggs, exactly the same way that they did. The first guy says scrambled, the next guy says fried, then poached. So when Ike presses Maggie, the truth gets revealed that if left to her own devices, she has no idea how she likes her eggs. And then she begins to make her eggs for herself in every way imaginable to try and figure out which one she likes. And of course, she ends up liking Benedict, which none of the guys liked. It sounds silly and funny, but when I think of a really poignant example of decentering men, I think of something like that. Because although you're like, okay, that's a movie, that's not real. It is actually real. There are a lot of women that operate with an inner compass as a man. And that is how they live their lives. And that is how they are perceived. And that is how they operate. And I don't say that in a hierarchical way. Don't kill me. Because we all fall victim to it. Because we live in a patriarchal society. This world was built by men for men. And women navigate through it. But often through the colander of what men want. This is how it is. And without making this too lengthy and too explicit, when someone says, I learned to decenter men, life-changing, I feel that. Because you would never be the same if you truly decentered men, you know, even in a little way. It would change the way you look at everything. It also, I think, kind of makes you a little depressed because, you know, the beauty of Revelations and the beauty of seeing things is like you can never go back to not seeing things and you will never be the same. And it's as equally a gift as it is a curse. Just gonna say that. But I'm trying to find like the perfect bow to like wrap this up. But learning to decenter men. If you guys want me to make a podcast on decentering men, like the baby girls version or the quick beginner guide to decentering men, that sounds like a cute podcast. I could probably do that without making it too intense. But if you want that, let me know. DM me on TikTok or Instagram and let me know if that's something you would want. And I just want to add in that, in my opinion, it's less of a gender war. I think people hear things like decentering men and, you know, men are doing this, women are doing that as like a gender war. And I get that's like an easy, salacious way of putting it. But I think it's women having their own awakening. I think, as Kimberly from For Harriet puts it, it's women against patriarchy. It's also men against patriarchy, but then also men against feminism. And again, I don't want to go on a tangent, but I just kind of want to add that little addendum for additional clarification. Segment 2, redefining power and boundaries. So at UGO Amero says, being called graceful isn't a compliment to me anymore. It's code for knowing how to behave in rooms where people don't think I belong. I thought this was fascinating. So kudos to you, because I thought this was very interesting, because my gut reaction is to say graceful is a compliment. Right? Exhibiting grace to me is sophistication, being ladylike, polished, very, very interesting. So let's get the actual definition of graceful from the internet so that we know exactly what we're working with. I think Google pulls from the Oxford Dictionary and the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. So grace, there's a couple definitions, but it says smoothness and elegance of movement, courteous goodwill, bring honor or credit to by someone's attendance or participation. Now, obviously, grace can mean different things depending on the context in which you're using it, but that's kind of what I think, right? Like smoothness, elegance, poise, sophistication. So when I hear that, I'm like, grace is a compliment. It's beautiful. It's telling of your sophistication, of your maturity. It's the second part that really ties in the meaning for this person. And it's like, it's code for knowing how to behave in rooms where people think I don't belong. And I find that really interesting because as a woman of color, as a Black woman, it's definitely a two-pronged approach, right? Like, graceful is often used as a reward for women making themselves small, palatable, and digestible. That's also part of the definition, but an unofficial definition, right? Performing calm under pressure. But when grace is expected because people are uncomfortable with your presence, that's not grace. That's survival. That's being palatable. That's being digestible. And a lot of us are just kind of done with that. Like, you want to be yourself, bar none. And again, I think that this is so timely because it's coming from women that are in their 30s and their 40s, that you spend so much of your early childhood and your late teens, early 20s fitting yourself into as many spaces as possible for radical acceptance. And unfortunately, most women don't really realize until closer to mid-age that radical acceptance always will come from within. And to me, that's what this expanded to be and really tickled my brain in the best way. What do you think? Do you think someone calling you graceful is a compliment? Is it something that you don't really think about? Or do you think there's room for misinterpretation or for it to be something that isn't as sweet as maybe you would have thought before? Let me know. Next one is from @AYE, and it's not giving a fuck doesn't mean telling everyone what I think. It means staying quiet and acting in my best interest. So I really like this. And this is part of the nuance that people often miss. It's not about becoming blunt or confrontational. You know, gaining confidence, not giving a fuck is not about just being hot-headed and off the cuff all the time. It's about letting go of the compulsion to always prove your point, always justify your existence. Often it's rooted in ego to always have the last word. Sometimes the most powerful move is just choosing not to engage. This is something that I wholeheartedly believe in, and it's something that I practice in my own life. Don't reward bad behavior. Don't contribute to bad behavior. Protecting your energy like it's money in your bank account, like it's money in your pocket. Not everything needs to be addressed. Not everything needs to be discussed. That doesn't mean being avoidant. It just means having discernment and having wisdom. I really like this because I think that when we think of confidence and we think of someone being very unapologetic, our gut reaction is to think of someone who's very forward and someone who's very outspoken. Power in a woman is 10 out of 10. So highly recommend. And I just love this little pearl of wisdom because I think it's something that, especially in your 20s, can be a huge differentiator between you and your peers. Certified Yapper tells us, I'm always going to be the villain in someone's story, so I might as well act in my best interest. So let's be honest, this is a freedom that most women were not raised to believe that they had. Like, let's just be very, very honest. Knowing that you're going to always be a villain in someone else's story, being comfortable not being liked is something that women are not taught at all. That is truly a unraveling and something that you have to teach yourself. And a lot of women don't. It's like my gripe with being nice. And again, this is something I could probably do a whole podcast on. I hate the word nice. And that is something that only dawned on me a couple years ago. That it's actually a terrible word. It's not a compliment. It masquerades as something kind when really it's very close to people pleasing, and it's essentially putting everyone's needs above your own. As a woman raising children, you should be aspiring to be kind, and you should be teaching them to be kind. And if you can do one service to your girls and to your boys, is teach them the difference between being nice and being kind. The beauty of being a boy and growing into a man is that no one expects men to be nice. Ever. They can be, but no one has that expectation. But women, if you walk into the office and you don't say hi to every single person you see before you get to your desk, you're a bitch. You're having an off day. Oh, what's wrong with her? Why is she in such a bad mood? Meanwhile, I've worked for lots of men across all age groups. They do not have to shake hands and kiss babies every time they grace the office with their presence. It's not expected of them. They can come in, do their job, and go home. They can come in, be a leader, and go home. But a girl, you go to work one day and you're not even wearing makeup, and it's a point of discussion. Anyways, don't want to go on a tangent, but the point is that, again, if you're acting in your best interest, one can say your highest self, which I think is really important to always check yourself, because is this ego or is this really your highest self? Honoring yourself without dishonoring others. I think that's ultimately the sweet spot, and that should always be your North Star. So I really liked that. This whole segment is really about moving from external validation to internal alignment. Look inward, not outward. Very, very important. How does this feel? What do I think? Are two very, very basic questions that you can apply to almost anything in your life to guide you on that internal alignment if you ever feel out of skew. And that can be about the smallest thing, like what kind of milk am I going to have in my coffee? Or that could be much larger discussions. Should I marry this man? Do I want to get married? Do I want to have children? Should I have another child? Etc., etc. It's not about not caring. I want to emphasize that. It's about caring differently, caring with intention, caring for others while also caring for yourself. A lot of womanhood is putting everyone above you. Motherhood is putting everyone above you. There has to be a balance. Women are happier when there is a balance. Caring about your peace over someone else's comfort is often the best way to go. Now, again, that doesn't mean you're causing someone discomfort. I'll leave it there. Segment number 3, this is spiritual and energetic realizations. There's 2 comments that I'm going to talk about here, but these I think were the most impactful for me. And they are things that I learned myself. And it's a lot more on the woo scale of things. So if that's not your jam, totally understand. Listen with an open mind, an open heart, and open ears. So Rachel Beland says, and obviously I paraphrase these just so we can kind of get to like the crux of what everyone's saying. Started connecting to the energy of money and trusted the universe that no matter what, everything is working out in my favor. This can sound a little bit weird and a little bit naive until you actually live by it. When you're raised around financial anxiety or hustle culture, it's radical to believe that you do not have to suffer to receive, because that is what you see, that is what you know. Trusting in the energy of money, trusting that the universe, that God, that your higher self, no matter what, is working out in your favor doesn't mean inaction. It means that you're moving from a place of worthiness. You're moving from a place of abundance. You believe in faith. You believe in something. You believe in yourself. You believe in these positive things instead of believing in fear, instead of believing in scarcity, instead of believing that if someone has, you go without, which we know is not true. This can truly rewire your nervous system, and honestly, radically speaking, this can change your life. It's a way more nuanced and in-depth topic, but if this piqued anything in you at all, even the slightest interest, I highly recommend for you to dig a little deeper. And a book I will recommend, especially when it comes to the energy of money and believing in what is when it comes to money and your ability to have money and live an abundant life, is The Law of Divine Compensation by Marianne Williamson. It's not a long book at all. I believe it was produced in 2012, and it basically teaches you how to pray, cultivate, and receive blessings from the universe and God in order to live a more spiritually driven life. If you like the verbiage of God as well, that's what she uses in the book. So that can be very comforting to someone who's maybe not interested or not comfortable with terms like the universe and stuff like that. She may interchange, but also if you operate under that assumption and that belief system, whenever someone says like the universe, you can always sub that out with God. The situation will be exactly the same. The blessing will feel the exact same. But if you are looking for a little bit of a mindset shift when it comes to money, work, miracles, and all things abundant in that realm, I highly recommend this book. It's not long. It's not an uncomfortable or heavy read, and it's broken up in like little prayers and also like wisdom. So it's very, very, very easy to read. Honestly, me talking about it right now is just reminding myself that when I go home, I need to read it again. I own this book. It's on my bookshelf and I see it every day when I'm working. I love this book and I bought it a long time ago. I bought it in like 2016 and it's still one of my go-tos. So highly, highly, highly recommend. Again, that's The Law of Divine Compensation on Work, Money, and Miracles by Marianne Williamson. Of course, I will link it in the show notes. And our final point is from @AmberDistance, and I saved this one for last because it's a little bit more out there and I want to give it the time and space it deserves for proper unpacking. So firstly, @AmberDistance, if you are listening, thank you so much for your comment. I loved it, and it was the comment that I wanted to expand on the most and what really prompted to share this in the podcast. So thank you so much. They said, quote, "I am the God of my reality. I am source. None of this is real. We are all existing within our consciousness." End quote. So now I know off the top that for some people, this kind of language can feel very out there, maybe even a bit uncomfortable, and there can be a gut reaction to shut it down, especially if you come from a traditional religious background. But let's unpack what this really means. Let's focus on the message, right? Firstly, this isn't about playing God. It's not about ego or thinking that you control the world. It's about agency, very deep and spiritual agency. Because make no mistake, no matter what you believe, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We'll leave that there. What they're saying is, I no longer outsource the authorship of my life to anyone else. I am the one who assigns meaning. I am the one who chooses what I give my power to. And trust and believe, we all have a hell of a lot of power. From a Christian or Abrahamic lens, think of it like this. We're told that we are made in the image of God, right? Imbued with wisdom, free will, and a spirit that is capable of discernment. So when we say, I am the God of my reality, we are not replacing God. We are not replacing Jesus Christ. We are not replacing the Lord. We're honoring the piece of divine that lives in us because we come from his image, right? I hope you get me. That still intuitive voice, that gut reaction, that intuition, that quiet authority that lets us co-create our lives instead of just reacting to things. It's also about choosing responsibility over victimhood. You are the victor in your own life. You are the hero. You are the heroine. If you believe that everything in your life is someone else's doing, then you're always waiting for them to change, waiting for life to fix itself. If you believe that your reaction, your thoughts, your choices hold real power, it's a game changer. That's when you start moving differently because you then realize that you have to stop giving that power away. So even if the language doesn't fit your worldview and your religious view word for word, the invitation there still applies, and there is still something deep and life-changing that you can take from it. What would your life look like if you acted like your thoughts, your boundaries, your healing mattered? 110% they mattered. What would shift if you stopped waiting for permission to do things? What would shift if you stopped waiting for permission to feel free? What would shift if you stopped thinking about what other people think on the decisions that you do and the choices that you make? A really good quote that I heard not too long ago that I shared with a friend just yesterday was, "It's your job to create the art. It's not your job to critique it." That kind of ties into what I'm saying here. This belief doesn't remove any of your faiths at all. It merely partners with it, I would say. It expands your belief, doesn't retract from it. I hope that's the right word. It says, if I believe I was made with purpose, which I know in Abrahamic faiths, you are made with purpose, and I know in Christian, like I said earlier, you're made in the image of God, then you have to act like it. That is your job. That is part of your payment for living this life, for being this spiritual being in this human experience. That's part of your bounty. If I believe in a loving creator, then I will stop moving through life like I'm powerless, because you were given agency, you were given power. That's part of your experience. It's not blasphemy at all. And that's what I want to end on this point. It's a type of spiritual awakeness and maturity that can complement a pre-existing faith or can be the catalyst for your own belief system through life. Now, I know that that one was a little bit longer in explanation, but I really wanted to give it the space it deserved because I loved it so, so much. I really did. That quote is deeply esoteric, but can be incredibly empowering if you allow it to. It's sovereignty, it's spiritual adulthood, and that's why I kind of wanted to end with it. Together, these beliefs truly speak to a quiet power, one that is not about manifesting like a Lambo or millions of dollars in the bank. It's about unhooking your safety from other people, from systems, from scarcity. Bold, italicized, underline, from scarcity. And honestly, once you begin that journey, I don't even say once you do that, because I do believe that when people say life is a journey, it's not just like a journey through time, like age and stuff and different phases. It's also like a deep spiritual journey. And I don't think that as a human in this world, having a human experience, you are ever fully healed. You will be on a lifelong healing journey, and everyone is, so you're not alone. So I don't want to say like once you do that, but I think once you begin that journey, or once you're on that journey, everything you do, everything you touch feels so different. The inner work, the outer work, your career work, your relationships, your sense of self, your confidence, your sense of enoughness, the way you parent, the way you love, the way you show up in friendships, everything, the way you show up with strangers, everything. It truly all ties in. And I can't emphasize enough how much of a game changer it really is. If there's one thing that this TikTok showed me, is that real growth isn't always loud and it's not always linear. Sometimes it looks like choosing rest, sometimes it looks like silence, and sometimes it feels like not only telling the truth to others, but telling the truth to yourself. So much of being a woman in this day and age is about like an unraveling and a true tough like unbecoming. It's unbecoming and reclaiming autonomy in your own life, because we're so engineered and pushed and encouraged by others and ourselves to be at the bottom of our own list, you know? From the deep personal shifts to the energetic ones, all the way to the hard truths that we've had to swallow about conditioning and gender and society telling us what a good woman looks like. And that is the gift and the curse, but definitely the gift of being in your 30s and 40s, because you're not really becoming someone new. You're finally like shedding these skins to become like your greatest self. It is truly like caterpillar to butterfly moment. I stand on that. So I want to leave you with some final thoughts and things to think about, maybe things to journal about over the next week. What beliefs are you still holding on to that no longer serve you? Or what beliefs maybe require a little bit more of a deep dive for you to think about to see if you are going to carry them forward? Or what story are you ready to retire? Not with shame, but with love, generosity, compassion. What is a story that you are really willing to let go? Obviously, this is something for you to think about. If the comments resonate with you, or if it's something that you want to share, find the post on TikTok, add to it. I would love that. Send this episode to a friend who you think could probably enjoy what we talked about. We talked about quite a bit of things in a short amount of time. So I know a friend out there that would enjoy this subject matter. Hopefully this episode comes at a good time for you. I know that, you know that quote about the tree, it's the best time to build a tree was yesterday. The second best time is today. It's like the best time to become your truest self was yesterday. The second best time is today. Okay. So for the woman in your life that you are today and the woman in your life that you will be tomorrow, I see you, I honor you, I am you, and I'm with you. Anyways, guys, that's enough for me. I'm saying goodbye from sunny Dubai. Have an amazing week. Have an amazing weekend. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.